Welcome to Visual Radio. It is, what is today? Today is May 2nd, May Day. Our May Day. Here at Visual Radio. Skip Williamson, welcome.
Hi.
It's good to have you back. Now you're here.
Yeah, actually I'm here this time. The last time I wasn't here, except in the ether.
You were the voice of God, and now you're here in person.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, you sent me a couple of discs, disc 1 and disc 2. These are slides?
Well, they're photographic images, digital images of my art. And, different sorts of things. Everything from commercial work to album art to items that were in Playboy, because I art directed for them for 10 years. And besides designing pages, I also published a lot of my own art as illustrations and cartoons for the magazine. So there's a lot of that stuff. And going back into my college days, even some of this art you're looking at.
Thank you very much. We'll go back in time to the beginning.
Right.
But we were just talking about Dick Clark, who passed away recently.
Right.
And we were talking about Dick Clark on the movie show. I did a movie show right before you came to the studio.
Yeah.
And we got on the Dick Clark track. He was one of the first guys, I think, that started actually compiling the film that he shot rather than dumping it.
Oh, really?
Like a lot of the TV stations.
Oh, I know. There was a show I was on in Chicago called Underground News, and they had everybody on. I mean, John Lennon was on, and the Grateful Dead was on. Whenever anybody couldn't show up, they called me and Jay Lynch up, and we'd go be on the show for the night. We'd bring our kids and wives, and it'd be like a playpen. But they were given 5 tapes. That's it. You tape over them, and they did. Like 500 shows.
And what year about?
This was 69, 68, 69.
And there was no cheaper medium to just dub it off onto?
No. It was too expensive. They had to reuse the tapes.
Even the dubbing was too expensive. That's outrageous for a historian that John Lennon tapes and Grateful Dead tapes are gone. And Skip Williamson tapes.
Right, there are some gone. No, there are still a couple of shows left that I'm on, but most of what we did is gone. So
Dick Clark was the smartest guy in the room. He would sell the stuff later on to licensing for $5,000 a pop,
Yeah.
Smart man. But you did some work on the Playboy interview with Dick Clark?
No, it wasn't an interview. They did a profile of him in about, I think it was 1982. May have been a little earlier, but they did a profile on him as being the eternally young DJ, and that's what it was about, his life and what he had done. And
Dick wasn't the centerfold because he was eternally
No,
young.
he wasn't the centerfold,
Okay.
not in this issue.
Just asking.
Yeah, right. But they asked me to do the illustration, the portrait of him for this article, so I did it, and I still have it, as a matter of fact. And there was a full-page article, a full-page drawing, and then the story began.
So for this very hip guy, he always wore a suit and tie whenever I've seen him.
I put him in his little American Bandstand like cheerleading jacket, with the American Bandstand logo as, right on it there. So
cool.
Yeah.
So
and he's got age spots.
Huh?
He's holding the microphone, but he's got age spots.
Okay.
That's the only way he's the age he is.
So he was very good at his keeping his image sharp.
Right, exactly.
Sharper image.
Yes. Yep.
So you were in the room photographing him?
No, I did a piece of art.
Okay.
I drew a caricature of him, I would guess you would say.
From just seeing his image, right?
Yeah, I was provided with photos.
Oh, okay, so you weren't in the room with him, I get it.
No.
Okay.
Nope.
But they had some photos and some drawings.
Well, no, there was just my
Oh.
drawing.
Oh, got it, okay.
It was like the opening shot, bang, that's it. Then you get the story.
I'm a little dense, don't mind me. How'd you get started in all this, Skip, and where were you?
Well, my earliest memories is really, in regards of cartooning, is I was like in the 3rd grade, and I was drawing Mickey Mouse on my workbook, and the teacher came down and hit my hand with a ruler. So I thought, well, if this sort of thing can draw this much anger from authority figures, this is where I want to go. And so after that, boom. You know, I drew all the time anyway. I mean, all I remember doing is creating art. But my first real experience with authority, you know, encountering art was in that classroom that day.
Now,
Made an impression.
creative people
Yeah.
often got resistance because we weren't in that box of math, English, geography,
Right.
gym.
Right.
And they had a box, and it was very restrictive. Do you feel that the rebellion and the antagonism helped the art, or would it have been better if the teacher said, you know, we've got to support you in this endeavor?
Well, the thing is, first of all, in school you can never learn art. You can only learn art out on your own and on the street. That's the only way to do it, is just to go out and do it. Because what they're going to teach you in school, you're going to have to unlearn anyway.
Good point.
It's true.
Wow, good point.
Yeah.
So you learned it on just
I went to a small liberal arts college in Missouri, and when I didn't even graduate from there, I got about 3/4 of the way through my senior year, and you know, turned on and tuned in and dropped out, and moved to Chicago and started creating magazines and publications and making art.
Now, did you run into Spanky McFarlane of Spanky and Our Gang?
No.
She was in the Chicago area.
Right, I know, I remember that, but no, I never ran into her.
And the legendary agent Bob Burke had a band back in the day, and he would open for Spanky. So,
Yeah.
And Buzzy Linhart would be out there,
Right,
friend of our Crumbs.
right.
Did you meet our Crumb out in Chicago?
Yeah, he came out. Jay Lynch, I went up to Chicago to be with my friend Jay Lynch, who's a fellow cartoonist, and we'd known each other since we were young teenagers in correspondence and through fanzines. And I had planned, you know, years before I actually moved up to Chicago to move there and publish some sort of publication with Jay. We had been talking about this for a while. And so in 1967, I just packed the bags and went. And Jay and I published a magazine called the Chicago Mirror, which was a magazine of satire and cartoons and like very underground newspaperish. You know, a lot of drug references, but it was really influenced by The Realist, which was a magazine at the time that was put out by Paul Krasner. But we got 3 issues out, and then we saw, in the 3rd issue, we put an ad for Zap Comics, which was Robert Crumb's comic. That's where it started. Although there's some dispute about where it started, but generally speaking, historians say Zap Comics was the first one. So Robert finished that, and then he got on a bus. He just finished creating the Janet Joplin's Cheap Thrills album cover, and he got on a bus of protesters coming to Chicago for the '68 Democratic Convention, and he got a free ride to Chicago. So he came to Chicago and didn't participate in any of the political actions, but he locked himself in a room with Jay Lynch and myself, and we created the first issue of Bijou Funnies. And every time he'd come to town, we put out another issue.
So Bijou Funnies was
Yes.
a underground comic?
Yes, that was the one that, there were the West Coast guys, and there was Chicago. And there were a few other outposts of, you know, comic activity, but those were the 2 main stations. And so it was Zap for the West Coast and Bijou for Chicago and the Midwest.
But you had the other paper that you did, the Chicago Mirror, and
Yes.
you put a Zap comic advertisement?
Advertisement that it existed, you know, that you can order copies. And so because of that, Robert Crumb came out and stayed with us, and we made comics together for many years.
Interesting.
I mean, and you know, we all had, the West Coast artists had their stable of great artists. They had, you know, Rick Griffin, they had Victor Moscoso, they had Kim Deitch, they had Spain Rodriguez, S. Clay Wilson, Robert Crumb. And then the Chicago School of Cartooning, the Bijou Funnies, they had a pretty impressive list of artists too. There was me and Crumb and Lynch and Art Spiegelman, who would later win a Pulitzer Prize for his book Mouse, and Gilbert Shelton did the Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers.
Now, 66, 67?
67 is when I started, and we started with the comics in earnest in 68.
And R. Crumb did Cheap Thrills, which I guess was called Sex, Dope, and Cheap Thrills, but Columbia Records made them just turn it,
Yeah, I don't know. The album cover he did for the front cover, they never used. What they're using, what you see on the Cheap Thrills album is the back cover art.
So he did front cover art that never got
No,
used.
never, and I've never seen it, and I guess it's in the Columbia Records archive somewhere.
I'll have to look on my Cheap Thrills booklet. Maybe in the booklet they put it, who knows?
Right.
Or maybe alert our friends at Sony to this
Yes.
great lost masterpiece.
Right, we need to see it.
So, and I'm going back to the time because in 68 I would have been 14 and I was collecting Marvel comics. I was a big Marvel, the House of Ideas, Stan Lee called it.
Right.
So I'm going to throw some questions at you about DC and Marvel.
Okay.
They were the Goliaths. They had Superman with DC and Spider-Man with Marvel. How did the underground comics, were they published by publishers or just self-published?
Self-published. It was all of the artists in the standard DC Marvel comic book. You have a writer, an editor, a letterer, a colorist, a penciler, and an inker. In the underground comics, you had one guy. He did the whole thing. So they were kind of a pure
Even the
form.
writing.
Oh yeah, especially the writing. Very important to do your own writing.
So,
Some didn't. Some were just writers and had artists draw it for them, but most of them were writers and artists as well.
now I don't know if you can answer this for me, but in Fantastic Four and say the Hulk, if Jack Kirby and Stan Lee wrote it, Jack would just draw and not ink it?
Yes. I did. As a matter of fact, there was a Jack Kirby tribute book that was published a few years ago, right after his death, and they asked me to do a page, and so I got to have a Jack Kirby drawing that I then inked for this book. So I've done that. I've inked a Kirby.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
Do you remember what you inked?
It was a character called Doubleheader from All American Comics, I believe, and it was a two-headed villain. And one side was this kind of hoity-toity, slick dude drinking champagne and with a flower in his lapel. And the other guy was like a street gutter guy. It was like, and they were constantly arguing among themselves, but they were the evil villain.
So Jack Kirby would make these
He
illustrations.
created a lot of it too. He did a lot of writing. He created a lot of these characters, that you see.
Submariner maybe, or
Yeah. But there were some great artists early on in that. I've never been a fan of the Marvel DC form of comic books, but in the early days with Steve Ditko and Kirby and there were just like some really good art in there. The problem with also the Marvel and the DC genre of comic books is that they all look the same. They don't have the artist, what the artist looks like. It's all hidden in the house style, and that's a shame, because before the Marvel boom that started in the '60s, in the '50s, they were nearly put out of business by the House Un-American Activities Committee, or it wasn't the HUAC. It was congressional hearings into violence and its relationship to teen America. And it resulted in the Comics Code. So all of the really great comics were put out of business, and the only comic book that survived was Betty and Veronica. And so
because of the Comics Code Authority.
right, yeah. I mean, you couldn't. There were just so many rules, and so many of the comics were in those days were really adult forms of entertainment. I mean, they were read a lot because they started being picked up a lot during World War II by the soldiers, and then when they came home, they kept reading these comics, and they told adult stories. It was more like Alfred Hitchcock or The Twilight Zone or that kind of thing. In fact, Ray Bradbury was writing for them for a while for the EC line. It's like there was this great blossoming of comic art, but it was pretty lurid, But comics are supposed to be lurid, and but they all got put out of business except for EC was the one that produced the best books. And what happened is there was this guy named Harvey Kurtzman who was an editor there, and Kurtzman had a little comic book project he had in his mind called Mad. And he started Mad Magazine. But it was really Mad Comics at that time. It was not the magazine format. It was comic strips, satire, and biting satire and loud and raucous, fun humor.
Spy versus Spy. I wonder.
Yeah, but that was before that. This was before that. But what happened was that that Kurtzman had William Gaines was the publisher, Harvey Kurtzman was the editor. There was some problem between them regarding the ownership of the products, and so Kurtzman either left or was shown the door. Nobody knows really what happened. But he went off his own, and he published a magazine with Hugh Hefner called Trump, which was the most beautiful single satirical magazine ever published in the world. It has fold-outs and all the bells and whistles, and it was a beautiful book. And it had Kurtzman as the editor again. So the work was absolutely superb, and he brought in the best artists with him. He stole them all from Mad. And
that must have made them mad.
Right? Yeah. There's an animosity going back and forth for a few years, but that only lasted 2 issues because the economy was soft and other magazines were folding. So essentially, his magazine, which actually was selling respectable figures, died because Collier's had failed. I mean, it was like one of those it was like there was a feeling in the industry that the magazine, unless you had something really solid, get out of it, you're going to lose money. So that's what they did. And then eventually he published a magazine called Help Magazine. And through Help Magazine, Harvey Kurtzman was the first man to ever publish the work in one publication of Robert Crumb, Skip Williamson, Jay Lynch, and Gilbert Shelton, and Artie Spiegelman.
A visionary.
Yeah, it was like he was like the guy that found us all.
Interesting.
Yeah, and we had worshipped him for years. He was like, we were called Kurtzmaniacs. And it's an interesting thing too. I keep going about this because on staff there was a young editor named Terry Gilliam, and Terry Gilliam Kurtzman would produce photographic funnies. It'd be like comic strips, but it would be photos.
Yep.
And one of the actors that they hired was young John Cleese. And John Cleese met Terry Gilliam there when Help Magazine folded, as Kurtzman's magazines always did. They went off to London and helped form Monty Python, in fact. And now Terry Gilliam is a very famous director. He directed Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. He directed The 12 Monkeys. He directed. He's had many numerous. So now he's a director and kind of a cartoonist too.
I have one question, go back to Kirby.
Yeah.
When an artist like Kirby or yourself does something that someone else inks and they draw it, are those paintings is that artwork saved so someone can't mess it up?
It used to be that they just toss it. I mean, up until recently, recently it's become collectible and they can sell this stuff at auctions. So if it exists now, then it will not be destroyed because people think they can make money from it. But it used to be the art was the least important aspect of the whole publication. It was the book that you wanted, and the art could just have you use it, throw it away, going to draw a new one anyway. So that was kind of the attitude.
But if someone did the painting on it, did they paint on the art itself?
You mean to color it?
Yeah.
Well, the coloring was all done in color separations. In other words, it was done on acetate sheets with little Bend-Aid dots and stuff called ruby lith, which photographs black, and you just take your X-Acto knife and you cut away and you add percentages here and here and here. And there's a layer for yellow, and there's a layer for cyan, and there's a layer for magenta, and there's a layer for black. And those are the colors that all colors are made from. So you have to know about this in your head, and you cut these. So
that's how they colored. They weren't actually painting.
No, they weren't painted. No. Now it's all digitally rendered, but then it was by hand.
I never realized that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And there are people that were great colorists too, like Marie Severin, the wife of cartoonist John Severin, was a fantastic colorist. Everybody wanted her to do their seps for her.
Because she just had a feel of the colors.
Yeah, she knew it instinctually, without even thinking. She could just throw it together, and she wouldn't have to stop and think about it. And she was quite good at it.
That is stunning.
That's a whole other thing. So, but there are no colorists anymore unless they do it digitally. which they do.
So a colorist now will just sit at a computer and
Right.
color.
Right, exactly.
And why wouldn't an artist like yourself just, or a Jack Kirby, even just color it in today in the digital world?
I do. I spend a lot of time, a lot of the images you have are black and white drawings that I've digitized to color. And I would suspect if Kirby were around, he would probably have someone, I mean, he didn't mind having other people work on his work. That was part of what he did. And I'm sure he'd be interested to see what some young geek at a computer could do with his, magnificent drawings.
So essentially today, you can actually take his old drawings and pull the color out
Yes, you can.
and manipulate and all sorts of stuff.
You can do whatever you want with it, yeah, sure.
So it's a whole new world.
Yep.
Which I was thinking about because the film critic Frank Dell'Ostrito was on right before you came in.
Yeah.
And he was talking about how vaudeville died away because of television. TV killed vaudeville. And I'm thinking, as all these things change, Blockbuster turns into Netflix. And we kind of, it's sad that these video stores, the VHS tape goes into
Right.
DVD, and now DVD is just going into cyberspace.
Right, I know. It's the snowball on the road to oblivion. It just keeps picking up more stuff and more stuff.
Google
and
wants
then
to
boom.
be your computer.
What?
Google wants to be your computer.
Oh yeah, I know.
Where they hold
do.
all your information on their hard drive, and it's
Right.
like,
Yep.
to me, that's just like such a violation of privacy.
Well, there's a lot of this whole thing that's popped up around us in the last 6 or 7 years, is 10 years at the most. This whole computer technology that we're so dependent on is just, it's just endemic. I mean,
But not only that, do you realize the robotic possibilities? It's not that they can just look into a person's brain.
right.
Like Alec Guinness in Star Wars, you can actually manipulate how a person, if you know how they're tuned in and their keystrokes and how quickly they have a knee-jerk reaction,
Yeah.
you could actually put
Psychological profiles.
You could do a psychological
Yeah.
profile and then put stuff on the web to actually manipulate them and make them do your bidding. I mean, it's that scary that Google could actually have your hard drive and say, well, let's make this person militant, and let's make this person Mother Teresa, and let's have Mother Teresa fight Hitler, like a real-life comic book.
Yeah.
It's pretty frightening.
I'd like to see that comic book.
Mother Teresa versus Hitler?
Yeah, that would be a good one.
Gene Landrum is going to be on the show. I will invite Gene Landrum because I've interviewed him on a radio show.
Yeah.
And he has a book, 8 Keys to Greatness, where he discusses Mother Teresa and Hitler and these strong personalities that were famous. And he's looking for a core similarity that made them famous. And he finds that many of them are manic. And that the manic thing drove them to greatness. It's a fascinating book.
Many artists I know are so driven by the art. If they didn't do their art, they'd be mass murderers. I mean, they just have to. It's such a strong drive in these people that you.
Why would you have to say mass murderers? Why can't
Because
you be
I've had
rocket scientists?
That's what my friend Christina, who's a Massachusetts artist and an excellent one. She was saying that she told me that she said if I couldn't vent with my art, because the art is a venting process.
Of anger.
Yeah,
It's channeling
exactly.
anger.
Right, exactly. Yeah, right. Because she's such an internally angry person, even though she's a delightful, winsome art babe, But inside, she's like burning up. I mean, she comes out in her art. But since she says if she couldn't create her art, then she would have to kill people.
Now, see, I'm a delightful person inside. I am a very extroverted, angry person, so
Yeah.
all my anger is external and all my delight is internal.
Yeah?
I think I'm very balanced
Are you?
in a psychotic kind of way.
Yes, well, I'm just going to say I'm very suspicious of balanced people.
Well, balanced in a very psychotic kind of way.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
I'm going to ask you a favor.
Sure.
This is my previous show before you were on, Frank Dell'Ostrito. And what I do is I put 5212, Frank Dell'Ostrito, 3 movies. So I'm going to ask you to do the Skip Williamson, 5212 Skip Williamson. That way I'll have your autograph on the mini DV case. Isn't that interesting?
That's just fantastic.
So I have a
I don't have my glasses. I can't see a thing.
comic book artist,
What is
writer.
it? Say it again. What is it?
Well, 5212 is the date. So I put the 5212 down, and then I put, guest Skip Williamson, and that's how we do visual radio. And we have archives and archives. I actually have a storage place that I go to. I'm having them install lights in my storage place, and in one storage is the TV show, and the other storage is the record label. It's like one big long room, but they divided it for me.
There you go, dude.
And it's very cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
And this tape is actually in the machine, and it's happening as we're talking. But, so that whole thing of vaudeville, we've got 2 points here. Vaudeville dying because of TV, but vaudeville's still important, don't you think? In a way, and underground comics is still important.
Vaudeville's still important because there's a resurgence in burlesque, which is really the old vaudeville thing.
There is.
It has the baggy pants comedian, it's got the pretty girls, it's bawdy humor. So it's really, yeah, I agree. There's a place for it.
B-A-U-D-Y, B-A-U-D-Y, not B-O-D-Y.
Right.
Body humor.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just had a burlesque guy on.
Yeah.
Mr. Scratch was here.
Mr. Scratch.
They have the Boston Baby Dolls. They're a burlesque troupe, and
Right.
he has a burlesque convention which happened like 2 weeks ago at the Hyatt Regency in Cambridge. But he brings people from all around that do burlesque. So you hit the nail on the head. Is that because we've got like 6 and 7 billion people on the planet?
It has a lot to do with it. There's a lot more consumption going on than ever before.
So people need things.
Yeah, right. And diversions, trinkets, shiny objects,
So then the
Worthless
underground
booty.
comics can come back.
What? Well, I don't think, it never really left. There are people doing comics now. It doesn't have the energy it had when we were doing it because it was like fresh out of the chute, brand new, bam, look at this. And the energy was very intense, and there's nothing like that being done now, and there hasn't been since the underground explosion. But there's good work being done in the comics field.
I'll go back to being a teenager again, and I'd go into Boston and watch movies.
Right.
And as I'm walking down Boylston Street, there was Madame Tussauds Wax Museum, which is now Emerson College.
Yeah.
There'd be little head shops.
Right.
And I would pick up the Beatles' Let It Be bootleg.
Sure.
Or Jimi Hendrix Live at the Forum on Rubber Dubber.
Yeah.
And there would be the bootleg records and the incense and the Zap comic books in your work.
Right.
Right on Boylston Street and Tremont Street in Boston.
That's how we literally were in every head shop in the country. That's how we became so well known. We actually invented the distribution system that the main guys, Marvel and DC, use now, because so we had a network of a considerable number of cities had those head shops. Everyone I can think of had a head shop, and they all had underground comic books. So our crap is good. Now, I've got pictures of natives from New Guinea sitting around a firelight reading my comics. They really got out there. We had the comics in Russia. We had a Finnish edition, Australian edition. We got all over the place.
It's amazing stuff. I started at 15 doing a fanzine, Varoven.
Yeah, that's what I started
record
doing, a
label.
fanzine. Yeah.
And and I later put out the Velvet Underground's Mo Tucker. I put out her first record.
Right.
The drummer, her first solo record was on my Varoven label. So the fanzine editor became a record company, and then she said to the late Sterling Morrison, I saw them in Cambridge, and she said, Joe's the reason why we're on tour. So I kind of got her out of the house, and then she made a career out of it.
Yeah. It's all your fault.
No, she was the Velvet Underground's drummer,
Right.
but she found these crazy fans, Phil Milstein, myself, and saw how rabid we were for what she did, that it was the fans later that appreciated her Velvet Underground work.
Right.
And one has to think, that work was so great, why did the fans have to... She didn't even realize who she was, that she was this incredible Rock and Roll Hall of Famer. She was just a housewife in Arizona.
Yeah, that's what she was, housewife in Arizona.
So these...
Until she became a incredible Rock and Roll Hall of Famer.
And now she does political stuff, and she goes to ultra-Republican.
Yeah, well...
How can
People
artistic
change.
people go ultra-Republican? I don't get it.
Any politics at all, actually,
Yeah.
for me.
So you don't write political, you don't do political?
I do political. I hate politics. That's why people say I love it. I hate it so much. Because I think it's a venal system. It's full of lies, and
You're right.
History is written by the victors, and it's a means of crowd control. And we don't have much input into it. All they do the smoke and mirrors voting routine, but it doesn't make any difference. It's still the same people, wearing a different mask. So no, I don't like politics very much. But I love it because it's a great source for me to draw about. In fact, what I do is I do paintings now. I do large canvases that encapsulate and depict political treachery and kind of like the human devious nature. It's like I try to pull back the veil a little bit. I've always had a great hand in dealing with political issues. I illustrated Steal This Book for Abbie Hoffman. He was a friend of mine, and
You illustrated Steal This Book?
yeah, I did. Right.
How to go get a gallon of gasoline for free.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. And I knew
That's amazing.
I knew Abbie pretty well. I knew Abbie and Jerry and all those guys.
I did not know that.
Yeah. And
We need them
so
today.
my politics comes out of radical politics, and that's what I still believe is radical solutions as opposed to incremental.
Sinclair?
Yes, he's a good friend of mine. I know John very well.
Do you know Ted Drozdowski plays guitar for him?
No.
I reviewed a Sinclair record on allmusic.com.
Yeah.
I'm going to veer off into a little of my political activism, if you don't mind, and then
Sure.
we'll go back to you.
Okay.
The city government of Medford last week, City Hall Medford, threatened to sue me twice.
What for?
The TV station over there had a president, Uncle Gene. He was the mayor's Uncle Gene, okay? So the Medford Housing Authority has been on the front page of the Boston Globe yesterday. I don't know if you see the Globe up there in Vermont.
I see it every now and then. It's
So,
up there. Yeah.
Medford Housing Authority, big scandal, right?
Right.
So Uncle Gene from the TV station was appointed by the governor of Deval Patrick to be on this Medford Housing Authority. He's on the board of directors.
Right.
So there was a big meeting, and I went with...
Nepotism.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So I went with the camera from this station. I went April 18th, just 2 weeks ago, and I'm videotaping. And the very final question, I always throw my question at the very end, let everyone talk. And I said, Uncle Gene, and he goes, "Hi, Joe." And I said, "What relation are you to City Hall?" Because I wasn't even sure of it. And he said, "Well, I'm the mayor's father's sister's husband. So I'm married to the mayor's aunt." And he goes, "But Deval Patrick appointed me." Now, I like Uncle Gene, okay? But that's just wrong in my mind. So I contacted Deval Patrick's office on the Tuesday, the next day. On the Friday, Uncle Gene was resigned by the governor. I don't think the governor ever knew until I alerted him and I got it on tape.
Right.
Okay, so now my lawyer gets an email. Mr. Viglione is, I'm taking him to court for post-trial contempt. I just won a trial with this whole thing in December. Post-trial contempt. I won the case and he was my witness, the city solicitor. So my lawyer writes back and, he goes, "Okay, I'm going to go after him for criminal harassment. He's been writing about me on his blog." Don't I have a First Amendment right to write about the city solicitor? So my lawyer wrote back and said, "You were credible at trial. The judge said this about my client. I don't see where you have a case." He writes back, "I'm going to pray for your client." Then the city lawyer tells my lawyer to distance himself from me. Hello? My lawyer's an old dear friend from the music biz. Can you believe this shenanigans? What did I do? I went to the governor and got Uncle Gene removed because Uncle Gene used to be at the TV station, so it never changes. This is this week, Skip.
Yes.
It never changes, does it?
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. I had a show in Atlanta, and some irate woman tore 8 of my paintings off the wall and destroyed them.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's murder.
I know it is.
The late Jimmy Miller, Rolling Stones producer, said to me, if you, even by accident, erasing a guitar solo, that's murder.
Yeah, it is.
Murder of art.
Right, exactly.
So what did you get the police on her?
Well, it's a funny story. The venue where we were showing had a little nightclub in the back, and I was doing a show very similar to this, where I was, would come on and we'd have a little witty banner and
in front of people.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Oh, was it filmed?
No, it was like just a nightclub. You go and there's like a stage show, like a talk show on stage, from local celebrities, sports celebrities, that kind of thing. So they asked me to hang some of my art in there for the event, which I did. And I came back the next day, and it was all gone. And I contacted the club manager, and he says, well, it's all there. And I said, no, it's gone. And it turned out that the owner of the nightclub's wife went into the nightclub area and saw these paintings, and she was outraged by them, and she just assumed that her husband had bought them, that she ripped them off the wall and took them up to the local Kroger and put them into the dumpster, and they were hauled away. You know, they're on some truck driver's wall now, or they're, you know, total obliterated, you know, with the cabbages and the rotten tomatoes.
And what did they do to help you with your loss?
She had to pay me full boat for every piece. Otherwise, she would have gone to jail. I mean...
So you got paid for it?
Yeah. But still,
the art is
but in
gone.
a sense, though, it's like what I was doing when I was a kid. You know, if this can generate so much anger from authority figures, then I'm doing it right. That's, you know, kind of my feeling about it.
So that crack across the knuckles is what made you the great artist that you are today.
Well, there are many things that made me what I am today, but the crack across the knuckles stays with me. It never leaves my head. You know, I remember it vividly.
Well, yeah, I didn't know that.
And I would steal comic books when I was a kid. You know, I'd go after school, I'd go over to the little mom and pop candy shop and stick the latest issue of Scrooge McDuck's.
We didn't hear that.
The latest issue of Scrooge McDuck's Comics and Stories. No, Donald Duck Comics and Stories. I loved that when I was a kid. So
okay.
I was drawn into larceny at a very young age by, you know, the magical mesmer of this medium that I work in.
And I thought that Abby Hoffman had done it to you.
Yeah. Maybe Abby Hoffman did it because of me. You never know.
That's why he picked you to illustrate his book.
Yeah.
You were talking about the House Un-American committees.
Right.
I remember
HUAC. Yeah.
Sister Bernadette and Sister Jamesetta, God rest their souls, over in St. Agnes, where I went to school. The communists are behind comic books.
Right.
Of course, I purchased, Skip, my comic books at her bake sale.
Yeah.
So the nuns were, I'm like, this is awesome. She's selling comic books at the bake sale in class. This is groovy. But didn't she just say there were communists behind them? I never got the, you know.
Yeah, how that sifts out, exactly.
Are we friends with the communists if I can buy the communist comic books in the nuns' classroom that denounced the communism? So I never put two and two together, so now you're telling me about this House Un-American thing.
And when you stop to think about it, though, it makes you use criticism when you're looking at the twisted and horrible events of your life. You know, it's like...
The hypocrisy or the paradox, I haven't figured it out. Maybe a combination of the two.
Well, they kind of dovetail into one another.
The hypocrisy is a paradox.
Right.
Yeah, it really and truly is. I mean, that's the church. You got the church issue, talking about the communism, but you brought up the House Un-American Committee. Do you think that's where the nuns might have got this notion?
These were the Kefauver congressional hearings. It wasn't House Un-American, but they were the same thing.
Oh,
it was a witch hunt.
It wasn't McCarthy.
No, it was a witch hunt for comic books because they were too graphic and too sexy, and they had to be stopped. Otherwise, children would all be juvenile delinquents.
Okay, it's been.
They did a study that said that all juvenile delinquents read comics, therefore comics cause juvenile delinquency. But the truth is, all kids read comics. So.
It's been my experience that when these people have these kind of things that blacklist or censor, it's usually some corporation that wants to get rid of the competition.
Yeah, it was the Archie Group.
Was it?
Yeah. They wanted Betty and Veronica. The Archie Group was behind it.
So, gee, all these years later, I hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, there you go.
It's, why is the mayor having his solicitor threaten to sue me? Because the monies that go into public access TV, which I told you were coming in here, 1.7 million Medford got.
Yeah, good.
The mayor's using it to underwrite, so to make it look that the taxes are down. So he doesn't want access TV in Medford, and it keeps his critics off the air. He keeps the mayoral opponents didn't get on the air.
Right.
We did a show here with one of the opponents, they banned it. No, we don't like Joe Vig, it's not going on the air. Well, that's censorship. No, it's not, we banned him. Well, you didn't ban him, he quit. And he's, you know, it's just like, so they kept the opponents. I mean, it's just so undemocratic. And everything that you've been painting and writing about, it still goes on. So I guess we need new young Skip
It,
Williamsons
it
in these schools.
always goes on. It's always gone on since the cave drawings. It's just gone on. There's always new people coming up and seeing what's happening. And a good amount of the artists deal with shining the light on the treachery, and that's been a pretty common theme for cutting-edge artists over the centuries.
But it's always the minority. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of kids got racked on the knuckles, but you really took it to heart.
Well, yeah.
And maybe today in this high school, some kid might take it to heart and have an axe to grind and put it into good focus to do something constructive with that axe to grind.
Right.
Your paintbrush is your axe.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. That's true.
So what are you doing today? I know you have a gallery in
I
Vermont.
have in Wilmington, Vermont. I have a gallery space. It's a gallery and studio because I live upstairs, and we were pretty much destroyed by Irene at the beginning of September. I mean,
In
our
Vermont.
our town was wiped out.
Wow.
I mean, the people across the street from me had 10 feet of water in, and it came down like a raging river. It was insane. It was just like fast rapids and animal carcasses and propane tanks and
sad.
I mean, so
the
what that
animals
means,
had
and it was the whole historic district of the little town, and that's where my gallery is, and so everything there had to pretty much be rebuilt from the ground up. Not the physical structure so much, but some of that, but all the electricity had to be replaced, and the boilers had to be replaced, and they had to be cleaned up so that they could pass government inspection.
So did you have a lot of artwork in the basement?
I had nothing. There's no basement for me. There is a
Really?
basement to the condo. There's no basement. I had artwork stored in a closet downstairs. I got all the artwork out of the basement just barely in time. I got it upstairs and out of harm's way. And but the stuff I had in the closet in one of those Rubbermaid heavy-duty,
Yep.
whatchamacallits. I thought that would keep the water out, but it didn't. And so I lost a lot of early stuff. Mainly publications and correspondence, but also artwork.
You had to throw it away?
Oh yeah, Saber Tree was covered with toxic waste. See, all of the when the flood came, it came downhill at us, and it had been washing over sewage systems and over collector tanks for chemical companies, and it's just bringing everything down, and so when it receded, and it receded fairly fast, there was just a thin layer of white dust all over everything, and that was dangerous shit, that white dust. Pardon my French. Yeah, and so they were really just getting back to it. The stores are starting to open now, and my gallery's about ready to go, and
You lost all these months.
yeah, yeah, and so you can imagine and it's a small town, so you can imagine the kind of economic chaos that's going on there. Nobody has anything, pretty much. But they survive. They must have read Steal This Book, because they're surviving.
That woman that ripped all your paintings down, her name wasn't Irene.
No.
Okay.
No.
And maybe she threw a hex on the town,
I don't know. Things happen to me. It's like I don't have to do anything. It's just like it comes dropping on my head like a piano.
It's part of being an artist.
Yeah, yeah.
Art, I think the universe likes to push artists and push and pull them and
Yeah.
reward them, then, pull it back a little.
Oh yeah,
All
that
the
happens
great-
all the time. The gods are absolutely amused by us.
Well, I'm trying to think of what Earth contributes to this big, wonderful universe, and the only thing I can think of is that we're so crazy, we amuse them like a TV show.
That could be. I've always thought that the Earth really was like an insane asylum for the universe, and that millions and billions of years ago, the aliens said, "Look, we got this group of people, and they're really a pain in the ass, but we're so humane that we don't want to kill them. So let's just put them off on this little blue marble at the edge of the universe." And there we are.
I mean, that's so parallel to what I've been thinking all along, that we
Yeah.
are just this little fish bowl
Yeah.
that they watch because we're entertaining. We're so
Right.
stupid, we're entertaining.
They have to keep an eye on us, though, because we get dangerous.
Well, I just removed the uncle of the mayor, of the
There you
26-year
go.
incumbent
Yeah.
mayor.
Right.
What, you don't think I'm looking over my shoulder every 3 minutes? I mean, these are dangerous people.
I know. Politics is always full of dangerous people.
But
Corruption.
The late Jimmy Miller, the Stones producer, would say, "You can't stand in the way of important art." And he felt that, one of the record labels, we had Eric Clapton that said he'd be on Buddy Guy's record. You know Buddy Guy?
Sure, of course.
And we produced Buddy in 1986 and 1987. So Columbia had offered us a deal. Columbia Records, a subsidiary, Epic. So Eric was signed to another label. And the fellow said, we're at war with Epic. And Jimmy Miller's on the phone and said, you're going to stand in the way of important art. And he sent the release form. Jimmy had the right word.
Right.
You're going to stand in the way of important art because
Exactly.
of your vindictive little battle
Right.
with the other label.
Yeah.
Amazing stuff. But if you have the right tone and you're respected and you can say the right thing at the right time, you can change their minds. That's what your comics do. You change minds, or you get people to think.
Get people to think. You don't have to. They don't have to follow what I think. They just have to think.
That's
they just
your
they have
mission.
to. Right. They have to just keep. I try to throw them something from left field, and they're startled by it, but it makes them think. So there's some sort of thing that's going on. I hear from people all the time that say they were very influenced by me over the years. It surprises me, but
Well, we met through WinCam's own Don Daniel.
right.
Are you writing something with Don?
We worked on a project for a while. It's kind of in a stalemate situation right now, and it's an idea for a television series, mainly at the HBO Showtime kind of networks as opposed to the ABC, NBC, CBS thing. But it was a story about a young man who works for a magazine, much like Playboy, in the late =60s, and then follows it through into the =70s. So it's my stories. I've written about 350 pages of autobiography, and I publish some chapters of it on blogs, and then I can extrapolate pieces of this to maybe use it as an idea for a book or use it as an idea for a television show. So that's what I did with Don, but it needs some rework, and we'll get to it and continue trying to hawk it.
Now, I would think that your story would make a marvelous book for one of the major publishers if you wanted to go that route.
Yeah. Well, I have it as an ebook. I published it, self-published it myself, but there's only so far you can go with that.
Some people are happy doing that.
Some people are, but some people they write different things than I write. I'm kind of startling. My work is very sexual. It's very violent. It's kind of Mickey Spillane-ish with a Hunter S. Thompson, dose
Whoa.
to it. And it's, but it's my life.
Mickey Spillane would really, when the fist hit the face, you'd feel the crunch of
Right.
his writing.
Exactly.
The blood would be splurting, and Mickey was very graphic.
He was, yeah. Yep.
Now, he's no longer with us, right?
yeah.
We just lost Mickey.
Well, for instance, I tell the story, and this is a true story. The reason I got to Playboy magazine was because I was working for this ratty little magazine that was kind of like a Life magazine, personality-oriented magazine. It was called Faces. And my publisher one day, these guys were all outfit thugs that ran this this magazine.
So it was a front?
Well, yeah, but the money guy was, the publisher was a guy named Robert Balducci, and Balducci had just gotten out of prison on a manslaughter rap. And he got all coked up one day and stuck some coke into his pocket and some weed and took his gun and went off to get a debt paid by this guy that owed him some money. And he broke into the guy's house. This is my publisher. And the guy who was sitting there, he and his wife jumped out the window. They went right out the window because this guy was going to kill him. And just then, their 15-year-old daughter came home from school, and so this guy grabs her and puts the gun to her head. He says, if I can't shoot you, I'm going to shoot your daughter. Right? They had gone to the corner and called the police, so the police came through the door, and they unloaded their service revolvers into his brain. So I was out of work.
So he died right there.
He died right there against the wall. So then I had no job. because the publisher had been shot dead by the Chicago police. So I went up the street where I had friends at Playboy magazine, and I said, "You guys got anything available?" And that's how I started.
That's a story and a half, so that's in your book.
Yeah, that's only a little piece. I mean, I've got some really good, gritty stories.
But this guy had already been away for a rap, and then he forms a magazine, and then you're out of work because he does his bad stuff again.
Right. Well, they never stopped doing their bad stuff. They were terrible human beings.
Vile.
Yegs. They were yegs and thugs, man. They were just, and they're real Chicago outfit guys with their noses smashed across their face and talking D's and does, you know, kind of language.
From all the punches to their head.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. So my question now is, Playboy, did you work at Playboy after Hustler or before Hustler?
No, I was working for another, it was the same, I was working for a guy who published Gallery magazine, which was actually right across the street from Playboy. This was 1973. And Gallery was going down the tubes fast because the publisher was Outfit, and he was spending all the money before paying the contributors, you know, and he just as I came aboard to be his art director, he torched his yacht, you know, for the insurance money. So
lovely people you hung out with.
Yeah. But what I was learning, though, you see, I was given a 300-page magazine selling $1.5 million a month and told to direct it, and that was great. You know, I didn't get paid, the checks didn't clear, I don't care. You know, it was a great learning thing. But what happened was, his ship went down with Gallery magazine, but he had already connected up with Larry Flint, who was like really, at that time, he was a kind of a Kentucky hillbilly pimp. And he had 7 clubs in Ohio, and they were all basically fronts for prostitution. And he had charged too much for the drinks, and he charged, you know, then you had the women. But Larry wanted to get into the magazine business, so he connected with this other evil outfit guy, and they hired me as their art director. And we opened an office in an old abandoned whorehouse above a gyros joint in Chicago on Lincoln Avenue, and we put together the first issue of Hustler magazine there. But I left after I worked there for about 2 weeks because I really couldn't stand Larry Flint. He just drove me crazy, you know. He was just like an angry guy, and so I kept telling him though. I said, "Larry, make it dirtier." And he did. He took it away back to Ohio, made it dirty, and there he is where he is today because of me.
It's a legendary story, and the whole Flint Falwell story. I think that book is a masterpiece of legal insight into the First Amendment. I mean, I just think that Flint Falwell thing is an amazing story.
Yeah.
We have about 2.5 minutes left. This is
sure.
Boy, when you come back down this way again, you're always welcome here.
Yeah, let's do it again.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of stories. We can tell a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and
it's all fun.
It is,
Yeah,
and you know, we'll put a crew together too next time and have it more glitzy, and we'll do more Hollywoodish.
Okay, cool.
So, people, we're going to talk more to Skip Williamson about his angry art and his fun art, and more about Larry Flint and why you had to leave, and then where you went from there. This is good stuff.
Yeah.
So you're going to have some fun around here, I hope. You're going to go see Dawn and hang out in the town, I hope, a bit.
We'll hang out a little bit, but we want to head back.
Yeah, because it's a long drive.
It is. It's 3 hours.
3 hours. Well, we're honored that you came here, and I'm going to ask, are you excited by these comic book movies coming out this summer?
No, I hate the comic book movies. The only one I liked was Iron Man 1. That's the only one I liked.
I saw The Avengers.
Yeah.
It's very good, but you might not like it because it's just it's all commercial.
Yeah.
Very commercial.
I know. It's like, there's no art there.
And you know, they wait for summer, just like those old annuals from Marvel.
Yeah.
They wait for, so now the Batman thing's coming out, and the Spider-Man, and Avengers, and Dark Shadows. Mm-hmm. Johnny Depp in Dark Shadows. So 1 minute left, and what I had something on my mind with all this comic book stuff. Yeah. Disney bought Marvel for like $4 billion.
Yes, I heard.
Maybe they'll pick up your old magazines for a couple of mil?
No. That'll never happen. But it's interesting because, you know, the comic